Hey guys, I'm Shriya. I hope you're doing well. I'm also fine as usual. And today in this video, I'm going to talk about two common mistakes that often my students make. Okay, so these are mistakes in English, not mistakes in real life. Okay, so the first mistake is to use did or didn't with V2 or past forms of verbs. And the second one is to use auxiliary verbs or the helping verbs with V1 and V2 forms. Okay, so these are the most common mistakes that they often do. They make. Actually, do mistakes is not the correct way to say it. Rather, we should say make mistake. Okay, so why we shouldn't use did or didn't or did not with V2 forms of verbs? Because did itself is the past form of the verb do. So, when you're already using the past form of a verb, then why we use another past form of another verb? It would be completely unnecessary and grammatically incorrect to use. So, okay, so one more thing that I must say is that do this verb is often used as an auxiliary verb and sometimes also used as a main verb. But when we are using these in sentences like I didn't try, or I didn't want to hurt you, or I didn't send you the email. So, in these kind of sentences, do verb is actually used as an auxiliary verb, and the verbs that are followed are actually the main verbs in these kind of sentences. So the next time when you say, I didn't try it, or I didn't want it to hurt you, or I didn't did this, be careful. These are not the correct way to say, or not the correct usages of the verbs. So you should better say, I didn't try, the verb V1 form with it, or I didn't want, or I didn't make, or I didn't do. Okay, so now move on to the next one. Okay, so the next mistake, I deal with it every day. Yeah, almost every day I have to deal with it. Okay, so never ever use auxiliary verbs like am, is, are, or was, were with V1 or V2 forms of verbs. Okay, so often we get confused where to use am plus like V2 forms of verbs, or where we have to remove these kind of auxiliary verbs. So when we describe something that happens every day or that happens on a regular basis, we have to use the tense simple present tense or the present indefinite tense. And here the structure is subject plus V1 plus object when it's necessary, because every sentence doesn't necessarily have to have an object. Okay, so sometimes we also have to use, add s or es with the V1 form of the verbs when you are using a third person singular subject. Okay, but sometimes people go like, I am make a cake, or he is go to school, or she is swim in the pond. These are not at all correct. Why? Because, as I said that, in simple present tense, we have to use the subject plus the V1 form, then the object if it's necessary. Only the V1 form of verbs. There is only one verb form in a simple present tense and also in a simple past tense. There is no need to use an extra auxiliary or helping verb in these kind of sentences. So in cases like when you describe something that happens every day, you have to use the simple present tense. Be careful not to use am, is, are with V1 forms. You can use am, is, are if it is used as the main verb, as a be verb. As for example, I am a girl, he is a boy, they are human beings. So in these cases, you can use am, is, are as main verbs as be verbs. These are the only verbs in these sentences. And also, if you want to describe something that happened yesterday, or last night, or last Friday, or last summer, or last year, like something, a past event, then you have to use the simple past tense. And here also, no extra verb or no auxiliary or helping verb is needed. You just have to use the subject, then the past form of the verb, and then the object if it's suited. So be careful. Sometimes you must have heard people say, she was repeated the mistake, or he was made the mistake. Then it is not at all, grammatically correct. You should rather say, she repeated the mistake, or he made the mistake, or I swam across the pond. You definitely not to you definitely must not say I did or I was swam across the pond, or I was crossed the road. You must say I crossed the road. Only simply using the V2 form as the only verb in these kind of simple tenses. So the confusion basically arises from another type of structures, another way to express your thoughts, and that is the passive voice. Okay, so in passive voice, you have to describe something indirectly, like something is done by somebody, or and in these cases, you basically use the auxiliary verbs and then the V3 forms of verbs. So, if you say that I was repeated the mistake, then it will be incorrect, because in that case you are describing something that has happened before, like past event. So you have to just use the V2 form of verb. This will be, enough. But if you want to describe something that has been done by somebody, like that was done by somebody in the passive form, then you have to use the V3 form of verb, past participle. And sometimes, like there are a lot of regular verbs that have same V2 and V3 forms, and because of this, the actual confusion arises. A lot of people think that these are all the same, but no. When you are describing something in the passive voice, you have to use the auxiliary verbs, am, is, are in the cases of in present cases, and was, were in the past cases. Then you have to use the V3 forms of verb, not V2. So the mistake was repeated by him, or the mistake was made by him. In that case, it will be correct to say. But if you say I was made the mistake, then it will be a drastic, error. So be careful when you next time use these kind of sentences or this kind of structures. Bye. Stay tuned to watch more videos like this.